Hello, my name is Owen. Today I'll be doing a quick review of Brandon Sanderson's The Lost Metal. What I want to do is give a brief overview of what the book is about, tell you things that I like, and tell you things that I did not like. Jumping straight into the overview, this is the fourth book in the Wax and Wane series and the seventh book in the Mistborn saga. So those of you who are not familiar, Era 1 of Mistborn is a classic fantasy. It's a trilogy with a certain set of characters. Era 2 is the Wax and Wane series, so it's a jump in the future, more of a Western aesthetic, and follows the characters of Wax and Wane and their adventures. This is the final book in the Wax and Wane series, the final book of Era 2, which means the next Mistborn book will be a different time period, different main characters, and all that fun stuff. That's the overview. Jumping straight into things that I did not like, because the list is a lot shorter than compared to things that I did like. This is the most Cosmere book of all Brandon Sanderson's, and it's a positive in some ways, but it was mostly a negative for me, not in a book-breaking way or anything like that. But for those of you that don't know, the Cosmere is Brandon Sanderson's wider universe that most of his major flagship fantasy series all share the same universe. So Warbreaker, Elantris, Stormlight Archive, Mistborn, and a couple other short stories and novellas and stuff like that all take place in the same universe, just on different worlds, different planets and stuff like that. And before, it was mostly just hinted at through small paragraphs or small interludes, or just very small hints of characters who have a different name but act eerily similar to characters from another book that you read. They have a different name and stuff like that. And Stormlight Archive started hinting more and more about an organization that's from another world that's influence events on Roshar, which is the Stormlight Archive world. This book just straight up unveils the curtain and goes yeah, we're that organization. It's us. And happy to meet you. The big reveal at the end of Wax and Wane 3, The Bands of Mourning. If you haven't read that, I don't know why you're watching this review, but I'm going to spoil it real quick. It's revealed that Kelsier is alive from the original Mistborn. I always want to say Kelsier, but apparently it's Kelsier, like French, whatever. He was revealed that at the end of Bands of Mourning that he's alive. So that was the big reveal of that. And then this book kind of addresses that a little bit more, and then introduces this organization that's influencing the entire Cosmere. And it was a little much for me. Not much in it's a little much. It was a little much as this is a little much, a kind of overwhelmed kind of way. And it was unfortunate because one of the things that I didn't read in the Cosmere was the novella Emperor's Soul, and a character from that series appears in this one, and I just didn't get the reference at all. And I felt like I was supposed to, when previously all his hints were very shadowed and you could pass over them easily. Because it was such a major character in this book, I kind of felt like I was missing out because I just didn't read that novella. And also just them talking about their greater plan and stuff like that. It kind of got overwhelming because I'm now I got to remember plot points and characters from other books to enjoy individual stories. And I knew this was coming, and it's a very exciting development that he's being straight up with his combinations and mixing up of characters and stuff like that. I'm excited for it. It's like the MCU, but it's just overwhelming and makes me stressed out that I got to remember so much. So that was constantly in my head when I was reading the story. Don't get me wrong, it's mostly about Wax and Wane and Marasi and Steris and the characters we know and love from the previous 3 Wax and Wane books. But it's just these characters are now they play a role in the plot. So it's just a little bit more in your face. And during reading those scenes, I was just thinking should I know them? Should I know them? Is this one of the things I don't have to know, or do I have to know it at this point? And I think it's getting more towards the half of you should know this, or it would be very helpful if you knew this, rather than it's a fun Easter egg, which was a negative for me while reading it, but it did make my after reading experience more fun when I was going to the forums and explaining to people this is this person and this is blah, blah, blah. Thank God for people smarter than me. That's all I'm going to say about that. But that was my only real negative. I will say, going into positives, this is my favorite Wax and Wane book. I still think the trilogy of Era 1 is better overall, but The Lost Metal was my favorite of the 4 books, and mostly because at this point, the characters are completely established. From what I know about Era 2 is that Sanderson originally wrote Alloy of Law as a single one-off book as a transition to the real Era 2, but then he kind of fell in love with the characters and then made it into a trilogy. That's why there's 4 instead of 3. So the first one kind of felt like a standalone, and then the second and third, while they were good, they were very straightforward plots in the sense that, not that they were like overly simple, it was, this is our mission. The book is about completing this mission, and then Brandon Sanderson, like himself, always throws like a twist at the end. It's like, you thought that the solution would be this, but it's really this because of this new thing. It's amazing, and I love it. This one, I feel like, was a stronger story because the mission was clear, don't get me wrong, but it was one of the stories, like all great stories in my opinion, it's one that unfolds, where you think it's a simple thing of stop the bad guys. That's the layer one. But then it unfolds here. It's stop the bad guys because they're doing this, okay? And also, while they're doing this, they're also doing this. So you got to stop this by doing this. And it's just like every new chapter was new information that made the story more interesting in my mind. So comparing it to book 2, Shadows of Self, it was, there's a killer on the loose and we don't know how they're so powerful and who they are. How do we find them? We don't know. Plot is simple, catch the killer. And while there was a twist on who the killer was and how they were doing their thing, the plot was always the same. Well, this one, there was layers and the characters were separated and they had their separate goals and their separate journeys. And it felt more like, I was going to say like a TV show in the sense of like multiple plots, but like books do that all the time. I'm such an idiot. But it felt well, like I was just thinking like Game of Thrones, where you have like Daenerys in a different continent and Jon Snow in the north and like people in King's Landing, or it's just like unfolding like that. But that's also a book, so it's just like a book, I guess. The guys, spoiler alert, this book is like a book. Idiot. Anyway, I guess it felt more like a high fantasy multiple POV storyline, similar to like his Stormlight Archive books, but with that more, not modern because it's still like Western, but with like the guns aesthetic, it felt really fresh for me. And I think honestly that's what did it, because I was always amazed for his Era 2 storyline, how he was able to update his magic system with new technology. And I think that he did it in the most interesting and intelligent way in this book for how technology is used and just hinting in the future of how the power of allomancy will change with the future. It made me so excited for Era 3 because they're already hinting at like aluminum and how it blocks the magic, but it's becoming more and more common. So what are allomancers going to do in the future? I don't know, but I know whatever they're going to do, it's going to be really cool. So I'm going to be super excited in the future. And also the characters in this book, they're like, I would say this is surprisingly mostly a Wayne book. The book starts off with a flashback from him, and he's like the real character for like character development. Marasi and Wax still love him to death. In fact, Marasi is like probably one of my favorite characters in this book because of like her, like the things that she does and her attitude and like just how badass she is. But their character arcs were kind of like continued, like you kind of knew what their struggles were. It's just them completing it as like the finale of their character. But Wayne went into a very interesting direction, which for a comic relief character, I really wasn't expecting that much depth from him. And it was a breath of fresh air. So just overall, I think Sanderson had a very tight but layered and complicated story with the background of his great, interesting world. And the hints of the wider Cosmere, while they overwhelmed me, they did make the story more interesting for the future, which I really do appreciate. And other than that, if you're reading Wax and Wayne made it up to 3, you're not going to dislike 4, even if you don't think it's going to be your favorite, like it is for me. But one thing it does perfectly, Era 3 is going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. That's all I got for you guys. Check out the book. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help a lot. See you later.